All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we are testing or doing simple chemical testing on our two unknown powders, powder 1 and powder 2. So you notice I've placed a few granules of powder 1 into these two wells on our well plate, and a few granules of powder 2 into these two wells of our well plate. So our first test is going to be a simple solubility test with distilled water. So we're going to place a bit of distilled water into the well plate itself. Very carefully, we don't want to spread it out too much. And then we're just going to mix it a bit with a clean stirring rod to see how well it dissolves. And if you look closely, it is dissolving quite well. So most of the powder has dissolved, really leaving nothing left in the bottom of the well plate. So powder 1 with water is in fact soluble because it dissolves in the water. Yeah, can't use that one again, that stirring rod again, because it's contaminated with powder 1. I'm going to do the same thing with powder 2 now. So just once again, a bit of distilled water. So into the well. And we're going to stir it around a bit. And powder 2, as you can see, is also dissolving fairly easily into the water. Not quite as readily as powder 1, but with a bit of stirring, really nothing left in the bottom. So once again, both powder 1 and powder 2 are soluble. Now, our next test is going to be a pH test of both of the powder 1 and powder 2 using the wells that we just placed water into. So we're going to use pH paper right over here. So we're just going to take a small piece, like so. We're going to dip it into the well with powder 1, like so. Place it aside. And we're going to do the same thing with powder 2. You can see an almost immediate color change with powder 2. To measure the pH, we're going to look at our pH testing strips next to our pH scale with a color. This is essentially litmus paper. So you can see that powder 1 is about a 5 to 6 pH based on our pH paper, whereas powder 2 has, well, that's an 8 if I ever saw one. So our pH paper with powder 2 is definitely an 8. It's pretty clear there. So powder 1, nice kind of orange color with a pH of 6, and powder 2, nice green color with a pH of 8. Our next test is going to involve the reactivity of our powders with hydrochloric acid. This is a 5% solution of hydrochloric acid, and we're just going to introduce a couple of drops of hydrochloric acid to each powder. So we're going to start with powder 1. And what we're looking for in this case is evidence of bubbling or fizzing. So just a few drops, and with powder 1 you notice absolutely no bubbling or fizzing. Let's try it with powder 2. Oh goodness, that is quite the fizzing reaction. As we can see there, lots of bubbling. Let's toss a little more in there just to make sure we got it. So yeah, definite fizzing on powder 2, no fizzing on powder 1. So once again, powder 1 is soluble in water with a pH of about 6, and it does not react with the hydrochloric acid. Powder 2 is also soluble in water with a pH of 8, and it does react with hydrochloric acid by bubbling and fizzing. Next up, we are going to do our conductivity testing on our unknown powders.